Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another You Be the Behavior Consultant. Nice to have you here. Hopefully, I am coming through there. Things seem to be a little slow on my end. I'm trying to see if everything is streaming okay. Let's see. Oh, there we are. I got myself coming through. Okay, well, today we're going to be talking about coping with the loss of a trained animal. A little bit more serious topic, but like a lot of people, I've been feeling like I've been posting more tributes to animals that have been significant to me, ones that I've been involved with their training. And so I thought this might be a topic that a lot of people can relate to. So I've got a lot of material for us to cover today. So I'm going to Oh, great. Gail's there. Thank you for letting me know you can hear and see me. Great. So I like I said, I've got a lot of material for us to go over today. So I thought I'd go ahead and dive in. So if this is your first time here, this is You Be the Behavior Consultant, and this is how it works. I have a topic for discussion. I've got some questions to prompt everybody to participate because this is a participatory type thing. I've got a few video examples to share, and of course, we're going to recap it at the end. I am going to do a little refreshing of one of my computers here because it seems to be kind of being slow over here. I'm not sure what that's about. Okay, there we go. Well, at least I can see my video's not playing on this one computer, but I can see your messages. There we go. Okay. So again, here is our topic today. We're going to be talking about coping with the loss of a trained animal. And before I dive all the way into it, I should say, I'm not a specialist in grief counseling or anything like that. So, so take all of this, with a grain of salt, so to speak. If this is something that's really challenging for you, of course, seek professional services. And we always do have a disclaimer in our description here. So, my questions for you that will be for prompting discussion is basically, have you experienced the passing of an animal that you've trained, and how did this impact you? And I really want to talk about how it might be different from other animals that maybe you were not involved with training them, and how was it different for you? And what did you do that helped you cope with the loss? And I see Cynthia's here too. We got some more of our regulars joining us. So those are my questions to prompt discussion. And I think because, like I said, I do have a lot of content for us to go over, I'm going to go ahead and dive into some of the material, but keep those questions in mind and feel free to add your input into the comments as we get going here. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is that I think when we're working with trained animals, it can be kind of different, at least in my experience, when we think about the passing of those animals. And I think it really has a lot to do with our reinforcement history with them. We just have a stronger reinforcement history in a lot of cases, and that can really make it a little bit more challenging when those animals are no longer in our lives. Oh, and here we go. We got some more people saying hello. Great. Thank you for joining us. And so we get, I would say, maybe a deeper connection is a way that I might describe that. And we have these shared experiences. So we might be overcoming some challenges, some behavior challenges. We perform some really unique tasks together. Maybe we achieve some really important milestones together. And again, that creates this partnership with that trained animal that again makes it a little bit more challenging when that animal is no longer in our lives. And we also may have some sort of routine developed with that animal. Maybe you're working with them on a daily basis. And so again, once that situation is not in your life on a daily basis, that can have a greater impact on you. And Cynthia says, absolutely different. I feel like I have a close relationship with the animal and I get to know their personality. Yeah, that's something that I don't have mentioned in here. And I think that's a really important thing to note, that we do feel like we get to know them so much as individuals. And I think, for me, as somebody who works in the zoo field, I do think about these trained animals versus maybe like a group of animals that are sort of at a distance from me, that I don't get to know them so much as individuals. That's a really good point. I also think, they learn these specialized skills, or they have unique roles and skills when they're trained. So Oh, and I might share a video clip with you here in just a moment. So they learn maybe really unique skills and behaviors that are maybe not so easily replaced, right? Because you've invested all this time with them. You know, and an example that came up, of course, was, you know, people that may be working with dogs that are trained to do services, maybe like guide dogs and things like that. But again, you know, we have a lot of other examples that we could think of, you know, even like the animals you work with, Cynthia. I mean, you do so many things with those animals. And then of course in the zoo community, we've got animals that are trained to cooperate in medical care that are showing some incredible things that can be done with animal training. We do train animals to collect information that helps us learn more about them. We put that under the label of scientific research, but I think that kind of gives or maybe a different impression of what that means. I mean, for us, like, we learn things about, like, you know, how the circulatory system works just by the fact that we can collect blood or something like that, you know, or we learn more, like there's a wonderful whole great ape cardiac care program that is, a lot of that is about what we can train the animals to do in terms of like letting us do ultrasounds on their hearts and things like that. So we get lots of important information about their just, you know, how their body works. And of course, you know, participating in educational programs. So so there's so much that we learn about them, and it contributes to conservation efforts as well. And again, there's the conservation projects there, and I've been really fortunate to be involved in projects that where the training has contributed to the conservation success of species. So that's huge. And of course, we have talked about animal ambassadors and how these animals that connect with people that get to engage with them, and then they go on to inspire people to do to be advocates for wildlife conservation. So that's huge as well. So let me share a couple of videos of some animals. You know, you see the picture of, you know, Audrey here, and you all probably saw I posted recently about Audrey who recently passed, and she was one of the very first giraffes that I was lucky enough to train, and to my knowledge, she is absolutely the first giraffe who's been trained to do this open mouth behavior that you see here. And so I do have a video clip of that where we were working on trying to build some duration with her, so I'm going to share that with you now. And again, you know, this is a really special animal to me, but also an animal that, you know, has learned an important behavior that we hope will inspire many others, and it's certainly inspiring the other animals that are there at the zoo where she lived. That's a short one.
One more time.
Start to slide again.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a really long one.
Wow,
Give her extra.
so
Give her extra. Inside her mouth here.
Good job, honey. Wow. Good job.
Donna getting out. Good job, bud.
You can see why she's a special girl. All right. So also, you know, these animals are important to the community oftentimes, you know, so you know, we have animals that do search and rescue that are trained. There's animals that, you know, visit people in hospitals. Again, we've mentioned the animal ambassadors. And then a lot of the animals that I get to work with are well known in their community because guests come to the zoos and get to know them as individuals. And so they have a great impact on the people that visit the facilities. Again, some of these animals become well known for their contribution to conservation. So that, you know, also has a really strong impact. And again, we talked about the scientific studies as well. So the impact is a lot broader than just, you know, us as the individuals that work directly with the animals. And one, you know, that, you know, I share a lot of videos on social media, and an animal that I had for a number of years, she came from a living situation where she was just kind of living in a barn and wasn't getting a lot of attention. And the original thought was that I was just going to borrow her to make a rabbit training video, but you know, the person who had her said, "Oh, she looks like she's really enjoying her time with you. Would you like to keep her?" I jumped at the opportunity and said yes, and then had such a great time training her, and she lived the rest of her years with me. But I also shared all the training with her on the internet, and I think she did inspire a lot of people to look at rabbits differently, as gosh, they really can learn a lot of things. And to my knowledge, I think she was perhaps the first rabbit to be trained to do a scent discrimination. And so this is my rabbit, who has now since passed on because they don't live forever, unfortunately. But she learned how to do a scent discrimination, and this is her scent discrimination behavior that I shared on YouTube and later in some other materials that I think inspired a lot of people. Fun behavior, and she certainly taught me a lot as well. And I know this one may seem a little, I don't know, maybe different to talk about, but there is an investment of time and resources when we consider the animals that we train. We do invest time, and I think for us, maybe it doesn't feel like such an investment of time. Usually animal trainers enjoy it, but there is time invested, and sometimes there's a financial investment as well. But to me, I think one of the things that I think of as an investment that is often really reinforcing to us, but can be significant, is that sometimes we overcome significant behavior problems, and that also really can connect us to these animals. Like, we push through that, and so it reflects sort of this hard work and dedication, and so then when you experience that loss, it's like, oh gosh, that makes it even more difficult after you overcame sort of these hurdles, and then that animal's no longer there. And so that's a tough one. So I have another video I wanted to share, and really the story is, to me, what's most interesting, more so than just the video. But this particular monitor lizard had such a tremendous story. He was found somebody had probably had him as a pet when he was just a little guy and kind of dumped him, and he was found somewhere in a ditch or something like that. The zoo took him in. He was really afraid of people, and the team there did a lot of work with him to get him. I mean, this was over years. Did a lot of work with him to get him to the point where he was comfortable with people. And you'll see in this video, by this point, he had, was getting to the point where they were having him come in and out of his habitat, and he's, at this stage, really, really big, and he had worked with a lot of different staff members over the years, so he had gotten to the point where different people could work with him, and so it was quite, in my opinion, quite a journey for this particular animal. And so when he passed, I think it was really difficult for a lot of people because of all the things that had been overcome working with him, and kind of the difficult background that he had come from. So anyway, here's just some very nice training that was done with him later on in his life. Even faster. Oh yeah. Oh, look at that. Much faster.
I probably will give him something here.
Okay.
Because he seems...
Yeah. And he came a pretty good distance for you at that time.
Yeah. So well played. Oh, I need that bad. Thank you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, so now we've talked about why it can be so challenging when we lose an animal that we've trained. But now we're going to get it a little bit into the sciencey stuff. And this particular slide really comes from a great presentation by Joe Lang. You know, I love the stuff that Joe Lang teaches us. And I found this to be just so helpful, so fascinating. We've talked before about emotions as contingency descriptors, and this is really a great example of that. So you may have heard about the 5 stages of grief, and what Joe really has illuminated for us is that it's really an extinction process. And so this slide gives you a little bit of an overview of that, and we're gonna go through this in a little bit more detail. So let's start with this first stage of denial here. So if you think about denial as basically that initial resistance to extinction. So in the initial stage, individuals may refuse to accept the reality of the loss, and maybe like, it hasn't really occurred. And so if you think about how we think about this as animal behavior sometimes, that might be the way that you can relate to it, is that the animal may just kind of continue to perform the behavior and may increase in responding, trying to gain that reinforcement, like, no, this can't be happening. This can't be the reality. And then anger and frustration may kind of result from that contingency, that emotional behavior that we see. So that reality setting in, this is sort of how we describe it in sort of those human terms. The individual might feel anger. This anger can be directed at themselves or others or the situation. So for the animal, that lack of reinforcement for the increased response leads to sort of this extinction burst, and resulting in frustration or anger and the corresponding emotional behavior. And so the way Joe describes it in a video clip, which I have referenced on the page where this is going to live, they said, like, if it was a rat pushing a lever and nothing was working, if you went to stick your finger in the cage, the rat would probably bite your finger in that moment. And then the next step might be bargaining or attempts to reinstate that reinforcement. That should be reinforcement, I think. So at this stage, individuals might attempt to make deals or think about whatever they could have done differently to avoid the loss. So for the animal, this might be trying different behaviors or variations of the current behavior to seek reinforcement from alternative sources to get that reinforcement back, right? And then finally what happens is, or not finally, but next step is maybe a depression, maybe decline in that behavior. So maybe we see emotional behavior that we might describe as sad or hopelessness or maybe withdrawal as the person's starting to feel like, it's nothing's working here. And then for the animal, the behavior declines as reinforcement is consistently withheld, and the individual might show just a general reduction in behavior as reinforcement just isn't coming. And then finally, what happens is acceptance and extinction of the behavior. So in that final stage, maybe we would describe it for the human as the human comes to terms with the loss. They begin to move forward with their life and saying, okay, this is my new reality. This is my new set of contingencies. For the animal, we'd say the animal stops using that behavior. They realize it doesn't work, and it's no longer going to get reinforced under those conditions. So again, now if we go back to this, if we describe it as extinction, it's a response burst. In the way they describe it in literature about grief, they would say you're in denial. Then we see aggression. If it's grief, we might say you're angry. In extinction, we'd call it occasional responding. In grief, they might say you're bargaining. In extinction, you give up little or no responding. In grief, it's depression, extinction, and then exploring or other behaviors start to emerge as you start to accept the situation. And then again, in the grief, they'd say it's acceptance. So again, I have a link to the video where Joe explains this a little bit more. And basically what he describes it as is these are the contingencies that are occurring, and the emotions and emotional behavior that are seen describe these contingencies that follow with the process of extinction. So again, this goes back to the work of Israel Golddiamond that a lot of us have been following here in animaltrainingfundamentals.com. So I also want to touch on crying. A lot of these things that we're talking about here, you could go so far down the rabbit hole of information. There's just so much more you can explore, but they all kind of tie in. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about all these things. So with crying, there are different kinds of tears. There are some tears that are produced to keep our eyes lubricated. There are other kinds of tears that we, and Cynthia likes the explanation about extinction and the 5 stages of grief. Well, again, I give, that's all credit to Joe Lang for sharing that. And again, there's a link to a video where you can watch his explanation of it, which is really excellent. So the reflex tears, that might be in response to irritants. Does learned helplessness fit in there at all? He didn't describe that in that particular extinction process. So I don't have an answer for you on that, Chris, but that's a good question. Let's see. So reflex tears, response to smoke, wind, things like that, to flush out harmful substances. And then emotional tears. And so this again maps onto the things that Joe talks about with emotions as contingency descriptors in Israel Golddiamond's works, because if you want to think about emotional tears, they are the outcome of a wide range of contingencies. So these are what's happening in the environment, and behaviors and the outcomes they produce. Because when you think about it, emotional tears can happen with the loss of an animal, a compelling movie, an argument. People even cry when something's really, really outrageously funny, right? So those are the results of contingencies. And again, when we think about emotions as contingency descriptors, emotional behavior and emotions are an outcome of contingencies. And so I think that's a nice way to think about emotional tears as well. According to the literature I read, these 3 different types of tears are also composed of different components, like actual physical components. So they actually are a little bit different. But again, if we go back to a behavioral look at this, when we think about emotional tears, they do provide different reinforcers for us too, right? So we do see that people respond to us in different ways when they see emotional tears, and again, depending on the context, the what contingencies are happening. So if somebody is in a certain context and we see crying, we may offer them help. We may offer them support. We may offer them, comfort, and that can bring people together. And so that can be reinforcing for some people. Now, for some people, that's aversive. We need to remember that too, or that everybody is an individual. So some people, when they're crying, they may not want our attention. So we always have to think about treating people as individuals. And I think it's also important that not everyone needs to cry or sees crying as an appetitive outcome for them. Like for me personally, crying can produce migraine headaches. So I have to be really careful. There may be times when crying could produce an appetitive outcome, but I also know it's going to produce a migraine headache. So I could be conflicted about crying. That's where I was saying, like, going down the rabbit hole of crying is a really interesting thing to explore in terms of, the behavioral outcomes or as a behavioral exploration. And of course, we also know that crying can be used intentionally to get desired reinforcement, right? We certainly know people that can cry to, if I cried right now, I could probably get some kind of attention or some kind of help. And people may be doing that intentionally, or just not necessarily intentionally, but just because they know it's a behavior or they have had experience where it's worked to get reinforcement. And so it's just a behavior that they use. So those are things we have to keep in mind too. So I would say, it's a really interesting exploration, and you may really think about next time when you're crying, what are the contingencies that are in place that might be making it so that this emotional behavior is occurring, and what are the outcomes of that behavior in that moment for you, and then that might give you some more insights as to why crying is happening in that moment for you. So again, I think it's a really interesting thing. All right, so we're going to explore some of the things now that people do sometimes when they experience an animal loss. And I'm going to describe these as sort of traditional practices, and then we're going to explore a little bit more about how people respond to these as individuals. So these are some of the traditional methods for coping with grief. So people do ceremonies and rituals, right? So celebrations of life, memorial services. I think this is pretty a common practice, right? And then we have anniversaries, so things that might commemorate significant moments, or lighting a candle, or visiting a memorial site, or a small gathering of people. And of course, there are cultural rituals. I think one that's pretty well known here in the U.S. and because we're so close, especially Texas, here close to Central America, is Dia de los Muertos. But I think what's interesting about it is it's more like a celebration with altars and food and music, which I think kind of turns it into a more of a celebration of life than sort of a sad type of experience. And then we might have memorial objects or places. So maybe an engraved stone or bench or trees planted in memory of something, of an animal. I think this is a really significant one that we see sometimes for trained animals, is donations or fundraisers in an animal's name. So charitable things, especially related to conservation, or maybe sanctuaries or rescues. Or I actually just attended an event with a friend of mine for an organization that raises money for cats that are they're not going to be able to survive because they have various illnesses, and so they just keep them housed in a place so they can live the rest of their lives comfortably, and so that they so that they raise money for those kinds of things. You may have a personal tribute. Maybe you and I think that's something that I have done, where I've written something meaningful for me, for an animal, that may go on social media. Maybe you assemble a video or photo album, and or paw prints or footprints or nose prints, things of that nature. These are from some animals that I have that have been in my life. Well, and I'm going to save some comments on that for a little bit later. Art, how about painting, drawings, tattoos? I do have a tattoo of an animal that was very important to me, still is important to me. Sculptures. How about composing songs or playing music? I think, if you really think about it, some of the most significant works of art in the world are inspired by people or individuals or that have passed, or animals that have passed, important people to others. Poetry, stories, theater, personal essays, all those things can be important to individuals as a way to remember individuals and animals. Traditional or creating spaces of remembrance, memorial gardens, memorial walls, where you can place photos, mementos, and messages, gardens with flowers, plants, and then community and shared experience, so support groups, public memorials, all those things can be ways that we traditionally remember these individuals that were really important to us. So now I wanted to touch on the pros and cons of these, because I think this is where things get really individual. So I think there are benefits to these, but it can also be aversive. So on the one hand, it gives us a place to, maybe be able to share our emotions publicly if you feel that's appropriate for you, which could bring social reinforcers, right? So other people can provide comfort. You can connect with other people, and of course it can create a legacy for that individual animal, and it can provide you a stimulus that can help remind you of the animal. And I think one of the things to help us remember about thinking behaviors and remembering that these are behaviors, right? And if you remember that thinking is a behavior, and the outcome of a thinking behavior can be emotional behavior and emotions. And so if you connected to that animal in a way that was appetitive, that makes you feel good, thinking and remembering can bring to you emotional behaviors and emotions that feel good. But some people may not want to remember. So if you, let's say the passing was not a pleasant passing, some people may not want to remember those things. And so sometimes thinking behavior and remembering things and seeing stimuli that are associated with that individual or animal are things that people want to avoid. And so it can be aversive for some people. So that is one of those things that can be very individualized. And so that is one of the things I wanted to point out. So one of the things, so you see I have a picture here of two animals that were very significant in my life. When those two individuals passed, I didn't tell anybody because it was too painful for me. I didn't want the attention. I didn't want it on social media. I didn't want many posts where people were giving their condolences, because I didn't want to have to address those, and it didn't make me feel good. I didn't want to respond to comments on social media because it was going to be aversive for me. So sometimes being reminded of the loss is something we want to avoid and not remember. I'm in a better place now to be able to talk about those individual animals, but at the time that wasn't something I was ready to discuss with other people. So those are things that I think are really important to remember, is that even though we have these traditions and we have these practices that I think most people would say, oh, this is the right thing to do, we have to remember it's an individual experience for every person. And so if somebody elects to be quiet or doesn't want to discuss something, that it's appropriate to keep in mind that it may be an aversus for them that they're trying to avoid at that time. So it's we often see this, right? And when celebrities pass and things like that, where they said, oh, the family would like privacy at this time, things like that. I think those are valid requests, right? And so that's why it's not always a reinforcing thing to connect with other people when those moments happen. Okay, so I think that was an important thing I wanted to share. Okay, so moving on, I wanted to talk about how some other ways that we can turn these situations into something that I would describe as constructional. So and Al says, I'm in the same camp. Yeah, so Al's also somebody, it sounds like, who maybe prefers not to have the attention in those moments when you experience loss. You just want some privacy, and I get it. Yeah, I'm that way too, as you can see. All right, so I wanted to talk about constructional approaches because there was a really great article that just came out from Jesus Rosales Ruiz and Leiden. There we go. I'm glad I referenced it on the page there. And it was more talking about families dealing with some challenges with their children, but I found a lot of information in it that was really helpful for just kind of coping with loss as well. And of course, a lot of it is based on Gold Diamond's original 1974 paper there. And I think what it really talked about was, how do you turn a situation that is difficult into something where you can change those contingencies and turn it into something that hopefully does bring you those appetites, brings you those feelings of, those good feelings, right, that come from changing your contingencies. And so, as we know from the constructional approach, the goal is not to focus on eliminating things. So we're not going to focus on how do we eliminate those feelings that you may have that are negative. And unfortunately, we can't, necessarily change the fact that thing is not there. But we could look at what are some new behaviors that we could build. And we are keeping in mind that whole thing that we talked about, how we have this understanding that our emotions are describing contingencies. And so that's helpful for us. So if, again, we keep in mind the descriptions of emotions are used to help individuals analyze their current situation and envision a better future, what could we do instead? So if we know we've been going through this extinction process, what could we do instead? And again, the constructional approach assumes that private events are the product of the individual's contingencies and will change as the contingencies change. So this means we focus on building new behaviors, and that will help us change our emotions. So for me, the way I tend to think about this is, instead of, kind of sitting there in my post-traumatic stress disorder, how can I turn it into post-traumatic growth? And so for me, what I have found myself doing is I think about those animals and what they've taught me, what they've contributed, and how can I turn that into something beneficial, right? So could I write a paper inspired by them? Could I create a course? And again, even just sharing videos, maybe that inspires, maybe their lives contribute something amazing to this world. And so, I have the bunny training DVD with Loretta, and some of you who are members of animaltrainingfundamentals.com, this was a very difficult course to create, but the dog prior to the one I have now, named Waylon, he unfortunately was suffering from nasal cancer, and there was nothing more to be done to save him. And I knew he was eventually going to have to be euthanized. And so it caused me to do a lot of study on euthanasia and how could I make his passing as best as it could possibly be. And so I turned that into a course on training animals for euthanasia, which is in animaltrainingfundamentals.com. And I made a guinea pig training video. You know, my guinea pigs, obviously, again, another animal that doesn't live a super long time. So a lot of resources have come out of the work with these trained animals, and not that everybody has to create courses and resources and things like that, but you'll find your path, if that makes sense, of what it is that can result from this, whether it's, you know, teaching another animal a behavior that was learned, you know, with that original animal, or you know, I have some more examples for you here in just a minute, but I'll show you a quick video. You've seen this before, of the guinea pigs playing basketball, and I know it's a cute behavior, but I think what it did for the guinea pig world, because now I see an explosion of guinea pig training videos everywhere, is it helped people see that guinea pigs can do so much more. You know, I think of how many guinea pigs just kind of get their food and get, you know, kind of manhandled around, and that's about it. But now we see so many of these companion animals trained that people never thought could be trained. But again, just a fun little video. I don't think I have any audio on it, so I can probably talk over it. But again, and it's just the possibilities is what became the result of training these two girls to play basketball against each other, and that to me is worthwhile, you know, spending the time. And obviously it enriched their lives, but the fact that it went on to enrich a lot of other guinea pigs' lives, and hopefully the people that trained them as well got a lot out of it. So I'm going to show you another video here in just a moment of a cockatoo named Jack. And for me, he all the work we did training him inspired a paper on how training animals to cooperate in medical care became so significant for reducing distress for an unexpected illness. You know, we always say, oh yeah, you should train these animals, you should train these animals, but then do we ever actually have that opportunity to really see how it can benefit when there's an unexpected illness? And that's what happened with this particular cockatoo. And it significantly made it so much easier to care for him when he had a very significant illness. And then that turned into a presentation that I was able to give at a veterinary conference, and hopefully again inspire a lot of people that, you know, look, this stuff works, and there's a reason why we do this, and we're not just saying it, you know, that we can train just to train. It actually serves a purpose. And so I'll show you just a quick video of that. Again, I think many of you have seen because I used to play this all the time, but yeah, this is just our early on training Jack for injections. Oops, no, that's not him. This one. And so for members of animaltrainingfundamentals.com, the paper I wrote that supports all the training we did with Jack and the presentation I did for that veterinary conference, I have uploaded that for this course, so you'll be able to download the entire paper and read all the things that happened with Jack and how all that training helped make a difference for him when he got sick. So again, Waylon, my dog, inspired a course on training for euthanasia. Audrey, the first open mouth behavior on a giraffe, as far as I know, and the rest of the animals in her tower are learning this behavior as well. Michael, I have a quick video of him. This is Michael and Audrey on this slide here, by the way. Michael's on the right. They were some of the early pioneers in giraffe training. They were some of the first giraffes trained, to be quite honest. We just didn't post it on social media. We just that was back when zoos didn't post a lot on social media. But they were some of the first, and they were doing a lot of stuff that people just didn't know about. But here is Michael learning to lean in on cue. Oh, and also showing how we set him up for foot care. But again, this is a really old video. Backing up. Yeah, so he's taught a lot of people, he taught us a lot, and he taught a lot of people who went on to teach many other giraffes a lot of behaviors. You saw RJ, the monitor lizard. He showed us the potential of large monitor lizard training. Again, taught a lot of people what's possible. Loretta, first scent discrimination training in a rabbit, as far as I know, who inspired many. Saibu, I don't have a video of him in this, but he's in some other examples that I've shared with you. He's an easygoing orangutan who helped us prepare to train the rest of the group and his potential offspring. And Caledonia and Lucille, those were my guinea pigs you saw playing basketball. Again, first guinea pigs to play basketball that I know of. And they were part of a DVD and video that inspired many. So, again, to me, this is taking those losses and being constructional with it, so that makes me feel good about the work that we've done together, and having shared time with these animals. I did want to touch on, again, this is a whole nother topic, but I'm going to touch on it briefly. And this is about animals experiencing loss, whether they lose a human companion or an animal companion. And I think this could be a whole nother live stream, but I'll just touch on it briefly. And again, some of the things we need to think about is, what was the animal's behaviors related to that individual before the loss, right? Did they have a lot of interaction? Did their interactions result in desired outcomes? And how frequent was that? So those are some of the things we need to think about to get a better handle on what that animal might be experiencing. And also, what behaviors are you observing now? Could they be going through that extinction process that we described previously? So you can observe their emotional behaviors to maybe get an idea of that. And then you can ask yourself, what opportunities are there available to access those same reinforcers now? Obviously, the individual that's lost isn't there to provide those reinforcers, but maybe you can provide other conditions to gain those outcomes. Is there another companion animal or human that can provide those outcomes? And and what new behaviors could you build, and could you make it as easy as possible for them to access those reinforcers again, right? So it's going to take more in-depth exploration to answer those questions, and depending on the situation, it may not be always possible to address. You're kind of have to look at each thing as an individual, case by case thing, maybe even right down to the behavior. Is it about, allo grooming? Is it about sharing space together? Is it about vocal contact? What is the behavior that is significant? What is the reinforcer that is significant to that individual, and under what context, right? Is it just having visual contact? So those are the kinds of things that you'd have to explore in a lot more detail to really understand what is important to that individual in that situation. But yeah, again, we could have a whole nother live stream on that topic, but again, think about some of the topics that we talked about here from more of like a constructional perspective and the contingencies perspective, and how could you change those contingencies to provide the outcomes that the animal potentially is looking for. Hope that makes a little bit of sense for you there. I know it's a lot to grasp and a lot to think about as we dive into this topic here. All right, so I'm actually surprised we got through this material in an hour here, but believe it or not, I'm going to bring us to the recap. So everyone experiences loss at some point in their lives. If our reinforcement history with an animal, was important to us, it was appetitive to us, we liked it, the behaviors associated with that loss might undergo an extinction process for us, right? And the emotions we experience describe and track the contingencies we are experiencing during that extinction process. So animals we train can represent extremely appetitive stimuli due to those highly reinforcing experiences associated with them, if you had a good experience with them. So it's no surprise that going through the extinction process can be difficult. However, we can cope by recognizing that contingencies impact our emotional behavior, and we can focus on new ways to gain reinforcement by building behaviors that result in desired outcomes. This can be via traditional remembrance, if that's something that works for you, because again, that's going to help you remember things associated with the animal, so that the thoughts will give that emotional behavior and emotions. In the world of animal training, it could be making educational resources that create a lasting legacy by inspiring and teaching others. That could be another way of getting those reinforcing outcomes for you. So we can turn our feelings of discomfort and loss into celebration of life and gratitude for the opportunity to share our world with animals who have been so important to us, and in many cases important to many others as well. So with that, I do have some other resources in animaltrainingfundamentals.com. There is the course on training animals for euthanasia. It's a pretty in-depth course, and it's all about really making that process with making it as pleasant as possible if it's a reality for the animals that you're working with. We do all this great training with them to make their lives, wonderful. I feel like the passing should be as wonderful as possible too. And again, we talked a lot about constructional information in this particular live stream, and I think if you haven't seen the live stream on a constructional approach to animal training, I think you will find that very helpful to understanding some of the things we talked about in this live stream. And also, because we talked about emotions as contingency descriptors, I think you will really appreciate this particular course on animal training that transforms and it measures emotional welfare. That'll help you connect to that topic. On to other things. I do have a new course in animaltrainingfundamentals.com all about training rhino species in managed care to improve welfare. So if you're a member, you get immediate access to this. It's got lots of videos about innovation and innovative approaches to training rhinos, probably things you might never have thought you could do with rhinos, and it might inspire you to with some of the training you're doing with other animals as well. So if you're not training rhinos, don't worry about it. You might find something you could use for training some other species as well. For members, a reminder, tomorrow we are going to have a tower talk. So if you want to talk about this topic or any other training you're working on, come join us tomorrow at the same time at 11. And just a reminder, we have cool merchandise at our store here on YouTube. And if you go to my website at animaltrainingfundamentals.com, just hit the shop merchandise. A lot of everything is inspired by all these great scientists who have taught us so much about the behavioral science. So you can put them on anything you want: t-shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, stickers, water bottles, and it'll remind you of all these great sayings that we are concepts that we're using and applying in animal training. And if you're liking what you're hearing here and want to support, lots of ways you can do that. Obviously, you can shop our merchandise. You can share these videos. You can sign up for our newsletter so you keep in the loop. You can tell a friend. You can become a member of animaltrainingfundamentals.com. And if you do become a member, you can get your credentials. We have a really cool animal training credentialing program that's pretty rigorous, probably the most rigorous one out there. And you get to get verifiable badges for not only tracks of training, but also for every single course that you take, which is pretty cool. And here is the citation for this week's content. We greatly appreciate attribution. We think it's an important thing for our industry. All right. Oh, and I forgot to mention, here is how you join. Just go to animaltrainingfundamentals.com. We have the monthly individual, which you can cancel at any time, the annual individual, which is a 20% discount, and the facility annual, which is the best deal where you can have up to 200 sub accounts. So, and everybody gets their own login. All right, there we go. Now we're done. All right, there you go. That is this week's live stream. I hope it wasn't too depressing, but I tried to not make it depressing, but hopefully a little bit inspiring about what's possible and how you can hopefully be constructional, right? You know, take those losses and turn them into something amazing and inspiring for others. And and here's the shirt for today. It's contingencies plural. And you can get your own version of that in the shop if you're interested. But I thought that one was appropriate for today because we did talk a lot about contingencies and how they're impacting your situation. All right. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more comments. I know you're all. Oh, well, Cynthia says, thank you. Beautiful lecture. Okay, well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I can't believe it ended on time because there were just so many little elements to that one. I thought it was going to go over, but we did all right on time, so that's good. Cool. All right. Well, like I said, tomorrow we are going to have a Tower Talk. So anybody who's a member of animaltrainingfundamentals.com, if you want to come join us and discuss your training, anything you're working on. Oh, you're right. Annetta's presentation. You're right. You know what? I did have that in here. Did I not load it? Ugh. Thank you for reminding me, Al. I did not load that one. But you know what? You are right. Thanks for telling me. I did want to remind everyone that we have a goats presentation coming up. So, and I made a slide for it and everything, and I forgot to put it in here. So if you go to ATF Goats, Annetta is going to be talking about superimposition, which is a super cool topic. And that is coming up on July 22nd, I'm pretty sure is the date. And yeah, I've seen it live already. It is a really compelling presentation. She's got some really interesting video examples, and you really want to know about superimposition because it could absolutely be impacting your training in ways that is not so good and makes it difficult to reach your goals. And it's a great presentation. So I'm super thrilled that she is going to be doing it for the Global Online Animal Training Series. That's what GOAT stands for. So definitely go to ATF Goats to sign up if you haven't registered yet. We have a lot of people that have signed up for this one. So people are really intrigued by it. And again, having seen it already, I know it's well worth your time. And she's added even more to it. So for sure. So yay. Thank you for reminding me about that, Al. That is a good one for everyone to sign up for. Okay. Yay. All right. Okay. With that, yes, please do come to our Tower Talk tomorrow for our members. It'd be great to catch up with you, hear what you're doing with your animal training, and we'll dive deep on anything you want to talk about. Great. All right, y'all, have a great day. Thank you for joining me here, and I'm so happy that we've fixed our streaming problems. No more choppy video, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. All right, everybody, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.